Ahoy! Gather around my kotatsu and bring a coffee or tea or something, and we're going to be talking about some stuff. I mean, Apple Computer is one of those brands where either you love it a lot or you hate it. Everybody has friends that are significant Apple fans who only buy Apple products, and they're really into Mac Live computers or just really like iPhones. Then there's some people who don't like Apple so much. They aren't a fan of either their business model or their devices, which have a tendency to have class action lawsuits put against them. But that's neither here nor there. I'm more of a Microsoft fan, just to let you know what my biases are. I actually own a Zune. Yeah. But regardless of that, I can be 100% honest and say that I respect Apple a lot. I think that Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak are extremely inspiring people, just to be honest. I love watching Steve Wozniak's videos about random topics just because I like watching how he thinks. And I think that their business model is incredibly lucrative. It's fun to watch Apple and see what they'll do next, because you know they won't always be copying what everybody else is doing. Or at least when they do it, they'll do it in some novel way that is just kind of fun to use. I don't have an iPhone, but it's always kind of fun to see what other people like about their iPhones. Anyway, I know that one of the biggest areas for Apple that people don't like about them as a brand is whenever something becomes a little smelly, they immediately cut it out of their product. Whether it be CD drives, USB Type-A ports, 32-bit app compatibility, Intel at all, although I haven't really heard anyone complain about that one. I actually like that they're doing their own silicon. I think that makes sense. Anyway, there's a reason why, and it wasn't until I did a little bit of digging. And in order to explain this, I'm going to use an interesting analogy. So a Boolean value, for those of you who aren't programmers or into discrete mathematics, it's a value that can only be true or false, 1 or 0. The bit system in your computer, how many bits you have, declares how large a word is, which is, to some degree, the smallest possible data type. So on an 8-bit computer, usually you'll find out that a Boolean is 8 bits long. Within some languages, the false is represented as 0000, 0000, and the true is 00000001. That's a lot of wasted bit space. But it keeps a consistent word size, so that a Boolean value, when you're reading it from one end, will be exactly the same, no matter if you're using a 4-bit system, an 8-bit system, a 16-bit system, a 64-bit system. You can notice that there's a little bit of wasted potential. When you have a 64-bit system use a Boolean value that's 63 zeros and 1 positive value at the end of the bit. And there are ways to squeeze potential out of these things by including multiple different Boolean values in the same variable. But what if you're trying to pack 64 variables into one 64-bit value, and then you try to port that to a 32-bit system? There are probably ways around that by splitting it into multiple words, but developers don't want to have to deal with that, and we've got so much memory in our computers anyway, so why don't we just waste all of this space? And this is something that you'll see more and more often. Electron applications like Slack, Discord, Spotify, Visual Studio Code, I love all of them. I use them on a daily basis. But they're 10 to 15 kilobyte websites that are being bundled with their own unique Chrome instance. And that's a lot of waste. I mean, it's secure. I get that it's secure. But it's a lot of wasted space. Think about, in theory, if these were native applications, how much space you could save. And I get it. They're portable. Same thing as the 32-bit thingy, where you're going to waste all this space just because it makes it easier to port something to from a 64-bit system to a 16-bit system. But, and here's the thing. If the lowest possible specs for your product line are really, really high, then developers are going to make programs that don't just take advantage of really nice specs, but expect them. If Apple cut off, as they did, 32-bit application support, then everyone's going to want to take advantage of things like a 64-bit Boolean thingy. Because you can do that. And I mean, I know people aren't actually going to do that most of the time because Slack and Spotify and all these applications exist. And people want to be cross-platform, especially with the web. The web is really cool. And the advantage of Macintosh is a little bit lost on the web. When people use Google Chrome, it obfuscates everything about the platform, so everything's very, very similar. And so it really becomes more about what kind of specs you have and whether or not they work well with Chrome as a platform. But, nonetheless, I can see why, for traditional desktop applications, why it makes a lot of sense for Apple to do what they're doing, especially when you have a closed ecosystem like the iPhone, and apps just by default take advantage of this. You might think that this is just speculation, but I'd like to show you a really unique clip from Steve Jobs himself back in 1988. This is right after he was, to keep the story short, no longer a part of Apple, and he was revealing the next computer, which is a really cool box. It's what the web was designed on. I don't know if that tells you anything, but anyway, just listen to this clip. I love this clip.
Now, why did we build all this stuff in? Because we learned from the PC industry that software developers have got to write for the lowest common denominator. They can't take advantage of features which aren't built into every single computer, or no one will buy their software. No one's going to take advantage of a DSP in their software. If to use their $200 program, you have to go buy a $1,000 DSP board, so it won't get used. You will never see programs for the Macintosh that escape the orbit of working perfectly on that 9-inch electronic screen. So you are bound in by your lowest common denominator. This is our lowest common denominator. A 1-foot square board containing the entire system.
So yeah, after Steve Jobs, this is sort of the zeitgeist of Apple that they've wanted to keep alive. And it's not for me, but I can respect it, and I can understand that that's their business model. That works well for them. And now that I've mentioned all this thing about the Boolean stuff, I kind of want to write an application in assembly to see how well I can actually pull that trick off, because that actually sounds kind of cool. I don't know. Anyway, there's obviously lots of other pros and cons to Apple being Apple, but I came across this recently and I thought this was something that you guys might like, that you might find interesting. If you want to hear more thoughts like this, I'm planning on keeping this YouTube channel alive. I'm not really quite sure where it's going to go, but I want to talk about cool stuff like this. And I would really appreciate it if you liked, if you left a comment, if you subscribed, just let me know what you think. But until next time, have a good whatever you have until I see you next time. And bye, guys.